Okay, it's 6 o'clock, so we'll call the November meeting of the Fauquier County Board of Supervisors and the 2025 budget public hearing to order. We'll proceed now with roll call. Jesse may join us virtually, but he is excused. So, all right, everybody's present then, other than Jesse. All right, then if you'd stand now for the silent prayer and the pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, you're all set to the agenda. Is there any additions or corrections to that agenda? If not, I would look for a motion to approve it. Motion by Mr. Gray, second by Mr. Piaski. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it passes. You were also sent the minutes of the October 15th, 2024 monthly meeting. Is there any corrections to that, additions or corrections to those minutes? To approve. Okay, motion by Mr. Wadle. Is there a second? Second. Second by Mr. Bossard. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, and that passes. Okay, at this time, we will have the 2025 budget public hearing. So if anyone would like to speak on the budget, now's your opportunity. Okay, seeing nobody's rushing up to the podium, I will declare the hearing closed. And then we'll move into public comments, and we didn't have anybody register for public comments this evening either, so we'll move on. There's no unfinished business. We'll go into new business, reports and presentations. The first one's from our county administrators, monthly report from the Corporation Council Interim Administrator Ruth Selsky.
Good evening. So I was sitting upstairs working before this and trying to decide what I haven't told you in the last 2 weeks. So bear with me. Some of this stuff might be repeats. This morning I had a phone conference with the owner of Union Star Cheese and John Bartz from the Wisconsin Economic Development Committee state, Wisconsin Economic Development, and then their builder. They're looking at doing an expansion at their facility here in Waushara County in the town of Aurora. And so I had some questions about new market taxes and what the could help with. So we're gathering more information. So hopefully that will go through and we'll be able to, it's a small expansion, but every expansion is helpful, right? So we're working on that. Deb Danker and I met with the workers' comp new loss control consultant. We're getting a new person. They're rearranging their regions. So we met with him and the highway department today and did a walkthrough of the building so they could look everything over to see if there were any safety issues or things that needed to be changed. And then we went over some of the past incidences and working towards figuring out things that we could implement to try and lower that. We have had less injuries reported this year so far, but that's something that we're always looking at. So we'll be meeting with the various departments that have higher workers' comp claims and the loss control consultant to do some training, and then hopefully we can get them back here to do an all staff training on behaviors, just so that everybody is aware of, you know, things like walking up the stairs, and if you see something on the ground, pick it up or tell somebody if there's water so that it can get mopped up and things like that. So we'll be continuing to work on that. I had, as part of the demolition project for the north annex and the courthouse, I had to submit an application to the Wisconsin Historical Society to have the courthouse removed from the registry. They have all of their documentation, and now we're working on a mitigation plan because the building would be a historical loss to the community and to the state. And so I'll be talking to exec next week about some options for that. Also have had some conversations with the people from the Y about what a mitigation plan might look like, and if we were to go the route of like a monument, if that could be worked into their design, and they are very open to that. So continuing to work on those options. The applications for the holiday project are due by November 15th. There will be a fundraiser for that project November 12th from 5 to 8 at Culver's. They'll be accepting cash donations, unwrapped toys, and non-perishable goods. So please help with that. On November 13th, there is the community lunch hour from 12 to 1, talking about the Y project with the foundation that is helping to provide some of the funding. If you need a link to log on to that, it's a virtual meeting, let me know. I can get that to you. On November 21st, there is a Creating a Tech-Ready Home in a Fast-Paced Digital world that is taking place at the World War II. It is for parents and caring adults to help with what's going on the internet. You have to pre-register by November 18th. Dinner will be included. The courthouse will be closed November 28th and 29th over the Thanksgiving holiday. And there will be some work done on the floors. So we are, if anybody needs to have access to the building, they need to make those arrangements ahead of time, because we are not letting people into the atrium area. Also, Light Up the Fairgrounds starts November 30th, and it'll be from 5 to 8 on Saturdays. So mark your calendars, start looking for those things. And I think, oh, and then Mike and I were meeting with the company about getting some ideas about, we had, after it was brought to our attention that some of our individuals were having trouble accessing our bathrooms, we did have everybody come back and do weight testing on all the doors and make sure that everything was code compliant. It is code compliant, but there are still some accessibility issues. So what is code compliant is not necessarily helpful for people who actually have to live it. So we are looking at options of having some automatic door openers on some of the bathrooms. And so that individual was here today to kind of take some measurements and get us back some numbers. So we're continuing to work on that project as well. I think that's it.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Ruth? Okay, hearing none. Once again, Ruth, thank you for filling in this transition period. We really do appreciate all you've done.
You're welcome, and I did vote for Megan today, so if she changes her mind, she still has an option.
Sure. Well, at this time, we're lucky to have a presentation on levy limits, mill rates, property taxes, and reassessments. I call on our community development educator, Tim Baru, to introduce our next guest, please.
All right, good evening, everyone. It is my privilege to introduce to you Carl Green. He's the local government education program manager for the UW-Madison Division of Extension. He has a master's of business administration from the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse and a Bachelor of Science degree in geology from Winona State University. In his current role, Carl works with local elected officials, extension educators, and partnering local government institutions such as the Wisconsin Towns Association, the Wisconsin League of Municipalities, and the Wisconsin Counties Association to improve local government operations and their services. Carl was also a contributor to the Basic Financial Handbook for Wisconsin local governments. Prior to this current role, Carl served for many years as the La Crosse County Community Development Educator. He's worked extensively with La Crosse County and its local governments on property taxation, housing, comprehensive and strategic planning, economic development, the frac sand industry, PFAS contamination, and ARPA funding. So at this time, Carl will share the connection between levy limits, mill rates, property taxes, and reassessments. Thanks, Carl.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Washera County Board for entertaining me this evening. I'm sure that most of this is going to be a refresher for you all. The purpose that I think is helpful is to try to provide sort of the backdrop of why some of the ways that we have a two tax system is in place, so that you can understand the purpose of it. And I think the main focus of that is because it's important for us to be able to articulate to our constituents and the electorate why things are the way they are, why are property taxes going up, going down, etc. And so hopefully, while this is probably a review, this will at least maybe fill in some of the gaps, or hopefully allow you to ask questions if there are any gaps with what we call our property tax system. So what I'll talk about today is how the property tax levy relates to the budget, how property taxes are calculated, how do levy limits impact property taxes, how are property assessments calculated and by whom, what are full or equalized values and how do they relate to assessed values, because unfortunately for the taxpayer we have a two-tiered system, property tax system. I'll explain that, and then I'll talk about what are revaluations and why do they occur. And I've got a spreadsheet that I'll ask the clerk to send to everyone. I believe actually she has already sent it out. That helps, instead of having thousands of property tax payers, it basically has 7. And it shows you what happens when some people are underassessed in relation to the neighbor, and what happens to the people that are overassessed in relation to their neighbor, because that's really where the interplay happens and what we're trying to cure with a revaluation. But we'll get into that once we go through this. So why is it so important to understand property taxation and revaluations? Property taxes are a very politically charged issue because you pay property taxes once, maybe up to 4 times a year, depending on how your installments are worked out with the county and the municipality that you're in. And so because of that, it's a big check that people are writing, and it is irritant to part ways with that much money. So I always like to ask, how many are aware of how much you paid in sales tax this year in 2024? Anybody have an idea? We probably pay a comparable amount in sales tax. However, what we pay it at 5.5% per purchase that we have, it's just a little bit at a time. And so you get a property tax bill for several $1,000s. That's a big deal. If it was coming out of everybody's check on a more gradual basis, it wouldn't probably have as much sting as when they get that property tax bill. Unfortunately, our timing isn't great either. They usually come out around Christmas. Not a great time to get a couple $1,000 bill in the mail. Unlike like a capital gains tax, where depending on the year and depending on if you are selling assets, you might not be exposed to capital gains every year. Property tax you're exposed to every year. So again, it's one of these reoccurring things that we have to deal with that unfortunately causes a lot of, I'll say, indigestion in the property taxpayer. And then you add on to that valuation. So because over time your property assessment roll starts to lose its accuracy, revaluations are required. I'll talk about how does that happen and why is it losing its accuracy. The state of Wisconsin has a 2-tiered system. They have the assessed value, which is determined by your municipal assessor, and every municipality, town, village, and city hires their own municipal assessor. And so they're individually having an assessor go out and determine the valuation of all the property in that geography of the municipality. But then the state is receiving, every time that a property is conveyed to somebody else, every time that there's a sale, they are receiving the data of that they indicate on the sales, whether it was a market sale or if it wasn't a market sale. They throw out the non-market sales and they start getting this collection of all this data that shows what market sales are doing. And so they start to see on a statewide basis how much valuation or building of value that is happening in housing markets, in the commercial markets. And so that's where the equalized value comes in. And I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail. When the equalized value and your assessed value are not in connection with each other, and your assessed value is quite a bit lower than your equalized value, then the municipality gets a notification that they need to do a revaluation. And people will scream because revaluations, they'll see what their revaluation amount is, and it'll go up 25 to 70% in this housing boom market that we're in. We're seeing a significant appreciation of property values, in particular in the housing. And so that gives people pause, and they're afraid because my value just went up 70%. Does that mean my taxes are going to go up 70%? No, that's not going to happen. I'll show you the equation that illustrates that. And again, this is going to be a review for you guys, but I think it's helpful to help sort of fill in the vague spots that might exist out there. And then I'll just ask you as board, when residents have questions on taxes, who do they call? Really as the elected officials, I believe it's our duty to be as informed as we can, understanding that it is a very complicated kind of difficult system, but being somebody that they can go to and ask is a great way to build that rapport with your electorate. Oh man, I gotta point this direction.
Stop working.
Can you go to the next slide, Mary? I'm not sure if it's on, but it's not advancing. Next slide. One more. So the picture below came out of our La Crosse Tribune, and it says levies rise, mill rates fall in most La Crosse County school districts. And that's what's happening. Levies are going up. Our mill rates are falling. And it's all this stuff is moving. And I think people are like, what does this mean? As they start to read. And, God bless the paper, they're trying to do their best job of reporting the facts. I think there's just a lack of understanding of what all these different components mean. So I always tell people, write down this equation, mill rate equals levy divided by value. Because the levy is what you're spending of the property on property taxes, and what is coming from property taxes to support the budget. That's the only thing that dictates how much is spent is the levy. The value, whether it's assessed when you're in a municipality or when you're in a taxing jurisdiction like the technical college, the county, or the school district, where you have more than one municipality, you're then using your equalized value. And I'll explain why. But essentially, your levy divided by your total value, assessed or equalized, is the mill rate that you use to determine value per thousand that you charge your taxpayers. And so when we increase the bottom of that equation, the total value, when we do a revaluation and that bottom of the equation gets bigger, the mill rate will go down. Because when you have an equation and you increase the bottom of a ratio, you're going to get a smaller outcome. And so levy limits, which the state has put on county government, state, town governments, village, and cities, restricting how much you can actually raise what you spend. So you can't go over your levy limit. So the idea, and I hear this a lot, that the community, the municipality is raising values more than they should as a way to get more tax revenue. And that just doesn't work, because you can only raise what the property tax pays by your net new construction or your levy limit. And so when you raise then that value to a significantly bigger number, it's going to drop the mill rate, which means everybody that is taxed at a lower dollar per thousand rate. So that's, I think, one misconception that is out there, and it's easy to start to feel that way when you get a assessment that says your property value is going up 70%, and they see municipalities or counties or school districts doing projects, and they think, oh, these are related. They're not related. So, things we hear, budget increases, the assessment is increasing by X%, the levy goes up, the mill rate is to decrease. So there's all these moving parts, and it's really helpful to understand, again, mill rate is what you spend from your property taxes divided by the value that you have to assess it. So when you look at a budget summary, and this is from Vernon County, but I do have Washura County that'll show as well. Really, the levy is the amount of the budget that you're putting on the property taxpayer. So your budget can go up, but you don't change how much you've put on the property taxpayer's back. An example of that, let's say you get a grant for a road, and it's an 80% grant, and you've got 20% that's coming from the county or municipality, and that's in a fund balance, or perhaps you're even borrowing for that. That's not necessarily meaning that property taxes are going up. Now, if you borrow for it, that's going to affect property taxes. But essentially, the levy is the amount that you're using to plug your hole of your budget. Your budget has all these revenues coming in from different sources, and you've got all the expenses going out. And that difference of what you have in revenues coming in and expenditures going out is plugged by the levy. Now, again, you can't change that levy more than your net new construction allows you. So you have a governor or a restriction on how much you can change that levy. But essentially, that levy plugs the hole of your budget because your revenues aren't going to be the same as your expenditures. And so we focus on the property tax system to make up that difference. Again, though, it's restricted by how much net new construction that we have. And in this example, I'm showing in the budget summary, you can see the highlighted areas, the total levy that is being paid by property taxes, and then what's the county's equalized valuation, and you divide those two, and you get the mill rate of, I don't have my glasses on, but I believe it's about 4.5. And then this is the Washura County budget, and about 22 million of the 50-some million dollar budget is funded by the property tax levy. So you've got 33-some million in revenues from other sources, but that 22 million that's not funded from other revenues has to come from the property tax. So let's go into that issue of the levy. The levy is, again, what you're putting on the backs of the property taxpayers to sort of plug the hole, the difference between the total expenditures and the total revenues you have coming in. But you cannot increase between years your levy any more than what your net new construction was. So what is net new construction? Net new construction is that value of development that has happened in your community, less any development that might have been in place prior to a construction project. So let's say you've got a new Quick Trip going in, they purchase a house, the house was worth $200,000, they tear that down and they build a $2 million Quick Trip facility. So then your net new construction, and that's all you have for the year, your net new construction would be $1.8 million. Because you had the 200,000 in value before, that got removed, so it's what's net of that construction. And then it would be as a percent of your equalized value, so whatever your equalized value is of your community divided by that net new construction is that percent that you have to increase. Net new construction isn't impacted by appreciation of the tax base. So when property values are going up because home prices are going up, that's not affecting net new construction. So that doesn't help you, even though valuation is appreciating significantly in your community. All net new construction is when you get new development that's either on a empty site or the difference between what was there before and the new construction after development has happened. So unfortunately, that new construction hasn't been a very helpful, at least on the municipal side, policy for the city. So we put together an advisory report that talked about some of the impacts that net new construction was having on local units of government. This graph illustrates all the municipalities in Washura County. And we list net new construction, we aggregate net new construction between the years 2011 and 2022. 2022 was when I put this data together. The data is from the Department of Revenue. All they had was back to 2011 for the entire state. So I did this for every county. And what I do is, again, I aggregate the total valuation that each municipality saw in net new construction. And then I compare that to the inflation rate during the same period of time. Now, where that black box is sitting on the screen, that's where the inflation rate is listed. It's 31.2%. And unfortunately for Washura County, no municipality had net new construction that was higher than the inflation rate for that same period of time. In fact, in the state of Wisconsin, there was only 64 municipalities between towns, cities, villages, and counties that had more net new construction than they had inflation. So that's about 3% of the municipalities benefited from this policy. The other 97% are trying to tighten their budgets and figure out what to do. This shows how Washura County compares to all the other 72 counties in the state of Wisconsin. So you're in probably the bottom quarter. And I believe you're between Price and Polk. I don't have my glasses on, but you can start to see where you rank in relation to other counties. And obviously things like your population, the type of development that you have, the type of community that you have, whether it's a retirement or it's a lake community, that's going to sort of dictate what type of development you get in your net new construction. Dane County, Kenosha County, Eau Claire County, those are in the top 5. So let's start breaking down the property tax. And does anybody have a calculator that they'd be willing to assist me tonight with? Got somebody that's going to be willing to. All right, so again, I talked about these two different valuations that you have in your property tax bill. And this is from the town of Leon. So this is a Washura County property tax bill for the town of Leon. And in the example, you've got total assessed value, which is the highlighted on the left, which is, I believe, $296,700-ish. And then you've got your equalized value, total equalized value, which is over on the right, my right, and that's 426,000. So divide the number on the left by the number on the right. What is it?
1.4. Or you want me to go the other way?
I can go the other way. Divide 296.7 by 4.35.
It's 0.69.
Should be 0.69. Yep. That number 0.69 is, this isn't really showing up great, but it's right there, right next to that yellow. So you can see the total assessed value, and then you've got a category right next to it in the property tax bill that says average assessment ratio. And that's that 0.6973, which is basically for that municipality, the average between the total assessed value, add it all together, divided by the total equalized value in that municipality. So it's at about 69%. Now, the state of Wisconsin says that you're supposed to be within 90% once in a 4-year period. that gives a lot of leeway for communities, and sometimes communities will go 6, 7, 8 years. I've heard even longer between revaluations. The problem with that is not only do you get this big jump in valuation in which everybody screams bloody murder when they receive that, but you also have inequity between your property taxpayers. And I'll show you an example of what I mean. When you have the assessment roll, which is again that list of all your property values, and over time that's going to age and not age well because it doesn't keep up with inflation, it doesn't keep up with changes to properties. And so over time, you get different parts of your assessment roll coming out of accuracy. And so some people's might be somewhat accurate, other people's might be less accurate. The people that are less accurate, and if in particular they're being underassessed, they're getting a tax break. And the people that are actually more accurate or overassessed are actually paying more. Problem with that is there's inequity between them. And that inequity doesn't just happen at the municipality, but it would happen with the county, with the school district, and with the technical college. And I'll show you why in a second. So again, the fair market value is this estimated value that Department of Revenue determines for your municipality based on arm's length sales. So every time that the Register of Deeds handles a property and there's a conveyance, and they will weed out conveyances that are not what they call arm's length or market sales. So somebody deeds their property to their kid. Husband and wife decide to enroll their property into a trust. Those are conveyances that are not arm's length. So they're not using those. They're only using the ones where you had a willing buyer and a willing seller, and it was exposed to market pressure, because they will then say this is a market sale. And they'll even weed out some where you just had somebody that was a diamond in the rough, they paid way too much for a property. They still will try to take out some of those. But keep in mind, that's where they're getting this data that on a statewide basis is a huge volume of data every year. And with that much data, they're able to get pretty accurate with what is the fair market value or equalized value in the state and in your municipality. So they're calculating it on their municipal or on the state side. Your assessor is calculating the assessed values on the local end. And then that difference, the assessed divided by the equalized, is the average assessment ratio that appears every year on your property tax bill. That's for the individual municipality, not for your county. So depending on the municipality you're in, that assessment ratio will be different. So the problem with a average assessment ratio that drops is that, again, it's an average, and that means that it's a fictitious number. It's the sum of values divided by the number of values. So it's really just a calculated number rather than an actual number. A median is a little different. A median is in a group of numbers, it's the middle number. That's not the same as the average. The average is the sum of all the numbers divided by the total numbers. The median is the middle point. And the point of bringing these up is that think about your assessment roll and what your people are assessed at as they're on this continuum between 100% and 0. And this is an example of that. So when I was a county educator, I was really trying to illustrate the impact reassessing had. And so what I did is I took for the village of Holmen, and I did this actually for multiple municipalities from across county. But Holmen is a very growing community, seeing a lot of growth. And I wanted to say, okay, let's take a look at properties that sold. What were they assessed at the year they sold? So what did the assessor think they were worth? And when they sold them, from the transaction of the sale, I was able to figure out what the assessor determined their value was. And I wanted to see what that difference was. And so for the year 2020, the total volume of homes were about 8.67% of all the residential homes in the village of Holmen turned over. Their average assessment ratio, again, total assessed value divided by total equalized value, was 0.8183. And for the 8% of homes that sold, this is how they fell on this continuum of value. And so on the bottom of the graphic, you'll see there's 1, and then there's 0.9, there's 0.8, 0.7. So the 1 indicates that people are what they were assessed was what they paid for the property, what the property sold for. The 0.9s mean that it was under assessed by 10%. They were assessed at 90% of what they sold for. The 0.8, same thing, but 80% what they were assessed at. And so you can see that when the average assessment ratio is 0.81, it's not that everybody is at 0.81. You've got some people at 0.9. You've got some people that are fully assessed. You've got some people that are in the 0.7, 0.6, even 0.5. Meaning they're paying less than half or half of what the actual true value, what the market value is of their property. And I know that because these properties sold. So I was able to say, okay, this is what they were assessed in 2020. And then when it sold, and that's should have been January 1 of 2020. And then when they sold, this is what they sold for, which is their market value. And so you see that you get this spread of valuations. And that's the problem that you have when your average assessment ratio drops, is it doesn't drop uniformly. And so because of that, now some people are paying at 70 cents or 70% of their value. And some people are paying at full value. And that's not equitable. So then they did a revaluation. Actually, they were doing the revaluation in 2020, so it doesn't come on into play until 2021. And think of how much it changes the sort of the outlay of data. You get so many more that are hovering around that 100% or 1, and then you've got sort of an equal amount on either side. And there's always going to be imperfections. You're not going to be perfect in your property tax system because your assessor is making a market judgment. They're trying to hit a goal. They're trying to, make it's more of an art than a true science. A lot of science and statistics goes into it, but it's an assessment that you keep. And so you're going to have some variability. It's not going to be perfect. But what you'll see is that you've got a lot more specificity, and it's a lot closer together so that you don't have big variations between people that are under assessed and people that are over assessed. So on here, again, the average assessment ratio, once they redid it, it went to 1.018. So now they've experienced that jump, and you've got a lot more accuracy in your property taxes. The problem happens for this inequity when you think about your multiple taxing jurisdictions. So a municipality is determining valuation just for their geography, but your technical college, your county, your school district have bigger geographies that have multiple municipalities in them. And one municipality might be at 70%, and one municipality might be at 90%. Now, we apportion it out, and I'll show you the apportionment. So this is a 2024 county apportionment sheet. What this does is it adds up every municipality's equalized value to get a total equalized value for the county for 2024, they have 4.3 billion, believe it or not. And every municipality then is a percent of that 4.3 billion. And so whatever their percent of the total is, that's how much of the county levy that municipality has to divide amongst its property taxpayers. So the equalized value keeps the people that are at 70 and at 90 equal for these multiple taxing jurisdictions like a school, a technical college, or a county. But once the total dollar amount that that municipality needs to get paid is determined, it goes back to this system. And if you've got people that are at 50% or 60% of the value, you've got people that are at 70, 80, 90% of the value, even though they're beneath 100 or beneath that full value, they're still overpaying. And they're overpaying in particular on the technical college, the county, and the school district, even though the municipal portion has been equalized and figured out. So when you have an average assessment ratio that's really low, you've got this inequity between property taxpayers, not just for the municipal services, but for county services, the school district, and the technical college. So that's why we do revaluations. I have your mill rate here for the county is 5.67. So just a review. And again, I'm pulling, this is from the 2024 budget. So the county apportionment sheet that I showed you that actually had a little bit more value than this shows is because that's from a year later. This is from 23, I believe. So the, so the mill rate here is $5.67. And you get that from that 22,396,000 divided by the total equalized value of the county. And that equates to 5.0, comes out at 0.0567. We then will put that into what we call dollar per thousand. So we communicate mill rate as how many dollars per thousand. So for the county, it's $5.67 per thousand value that you pay. So keep in mind that on your property tax bill, the individual mill rate for the county, for the school district, for the tech college isn't necessarily listed. What they list and what I have highlighted here is the net mill rate. And so that's aggregating all the mill rates of all the taxing jurisdictions together. So whatever that net assessed rate is the combined mill rate of all the taxing jurisdictions. Unfortunately, when we pay our property taxes, we usually pay it at either the county or the local municipality. I'm not even sure if all the property taxpayers understand that the school district is on their tax bill, the technical college is on their tax bill. There's all these taxing entities that are on their tax bill that is part of that thousands of dollars that they're writing a check to clerk or to the municipal clerk. And I think the frustration is that I'm writing all this money to this community. It's like, well, actually we're dividing this, 4 or 5 ways. Plus it's not going all to the community. So again, why is the average assessment ratio so important? The taxing jurisdictions apportion the valuation based on equalized value, but once you get those individual tax bills, those are going to be based on the valuation determined by the municipal assessor, so it's based on assessed value, and it will cause a higher carrying or a greater amount to be carried of county taxes, of school district taxes, and of technical college taxes when you have a system that has people underpaying and people overpaying. When you have that average assessment ratio dropping beneath that 10%, you're going to start to get that variation between property taxpayers. So that's why revaluations are required. I have sent or I asked our clerk to send a copy of a spreadsheet that I talked about in the beginning. It's got 7 property tax owners. I've got a mild budget increase where the budget I think actually increases by 6%. And you can start to see when people are under assessed and some people are moderately assessed or assessed at about about 90%. What happens when it all goes to about around 100%? Some people will see no change in their property tax bill. Some people will see a big change in their property tax bill, and some people actually see, even though their valuation went up, their property tax is going down. And the reason for that is those people were overpaying before. The people that are seeing the big jump were underpaying before. So you're trying to, the system is trying to solve for that inaccuracy between property taxpayers, and that's why revaluations are required. Again, your levy is what is the only thing that gives money to the municipality or to the county. You can only increase your levy by your net new construction. You've got other types of ways that you can get somewhat around that, but it's essentially it holds the line on how much you can spend and increase spending. So levy limits really control the amount of value that you can raise through your levy. And appreciation of your tax base doesn't put more money into a county or a municipality into their coffers. It simply spreads that mill rate out in a different manner, and essentially the mill rate drops when your valuation goes up significantly. So in summary, levy is a portion of the budget supported by property taxes. How are property taxes calculated? Again, write that down. Mill rate is the levy divided by the value. Again, depending on if you're talking about the county or a municipality, you're going to use assessed value for the municipality. For multiple taxing jurisdictions like the Tech College School District in the county, you use the equalized value of the geography that you're talking about. How are property assessments calculated by whom? It's your municipal assessor. They're the ones handling the assessing. They're the ones that are supposed to, and the municipalities are the ones supposed to keep their eye on this average assessment ratio, but it does come out in everybody's property tax bill, and depending on the municipality you live in, it'll be different than the example I showed you. Revaluations are required depending on how often you're updating your total valuation. And state statute requires that every taxation district shall assess property at full value at least once in a 5-year period. So it gets reset when a revaluation happens. Your assessed value and equalized value should be about the same. And over time, that assessed value starts to become inaccurate as property improvements happen, as appreciation of the market happens, as all these other things change. That assessed value doesn't change, and that's what needs to be changed during a revaluation. So I've given you quite a bit. I'd say, depending on how much time you guys have, I'll stay and try to answer as many questions as I can. If you want to just email me, my email is on here. If you have a question that you just don't want to ask out loud, that's fine. Send me an email.
Does anybody have a question for Carl?
Can you explain fair market value, how that's determined again? I didn't quite understand.
Sure. So I use the terms fair market value and equalized value. And they're kind of the same. So your fair market value is to be just that, the market value of a property. So what if you were to list your property and you had a willing seller, a willing buyer, and you were a willing seller, what would that fetch on the fair market? And every time that a property is sold or changes hands, the Register of Deeds sends that record to the Department of Revenue. And so the Department of Revenue is aggregating all of these transfers of property, and they're on the record. I believe the register or the assessor determines if it's a market sale or not, and what the conditions of the sale were. And there's a significant list of conditions that would be different. Again, I've talked about a few of them, but if you're giving property to a kid, if you're putting it into a trust, if there's some sort of non-market issue that's causing that property to exchange hands, those are being thrown out. And then they're aggregating all of that value on a municipal basis, on a regional basis, and they start to see the full market value shift based on these sales over time. So every year they're aggregating a new year of sales, and that's showing usually an appreciation, increase of valuation.
So it's an average based upon where you are or.
It's a calculation, yeah, it's a statistical calculation. I wouldn't call it an average, but I'd say it's a statistical calculation.
I get the constituents that'll say, I haven't sold my house and I've been living in my house for 50 years, and how can they up my fair market value when I haven't? So that's the kind of question I get. So
Yeah, so what I would say is, yeah, you haven't sold that house, but there's enough properties that have sold that we can figure out a square footage on a type of house, and all this data, you can actually, it's really well presented through the Department of Revenue's reports website. But all that data is collected, calculated, and they can determine what sort of that appreciation of a 3-bedroom house is. They probably can determine based on location or based on regions, you know, if it's appreciated more here versus here. But they're calculating that statistically to determine what that full market value is. Once they do that, they call that, they equalize the data. And so it's kind of a synonymous term, equalized value and full market value, but essentially what it's represents is the market value on the entire, the full community basis.
Okay. Anybody else? I have a quick question for you. I know you said that the new net construction, using that for determining the levy, isn't keeping up with inflation by several percentage points. With wages rising significantly all over, and insurance increasing, what do you see other counties doing, or counties that maybe are in trouble with this? Are they charging more for services, trying to get more revenue, or are they cutting services or combining with other counties? What do you see, I guess?
Depends on the community and the county. Yeah, some counties, by the time they figured in wage increases and you know, insurance costs for the workers, they're not left with any more wiggle room. So they're, in those examples, they're trying to figure out where do we look at staffing cuts. Other counties are, I think, looking at how are they charging for services? Is there a way that we can get revenue coming in, not through the property tax, that we can you know, try to get at least some form of a revenue stream from it. Some communities are, you know, relying more on borrowing. They're putting more of infrastructure, road projects, things that have a long life, and they're putting borrowing capacity towards that, so that they're not borrowing for staffing, they're not borrowing for everyday costs, but the stuff that has a longer life, they're putting on a, you know, some sort of a debt instrument. It's really a mix depending on what's happening. But as I think the graphic showed, even Dane County as a county didn't exceed inflation. Dane County is their fastest growing county. So I think municipalities, towns, villages, cities, and counties are all struggling with this. There is a list of things that counties that they don't have to put on the levy. You know, I think they're probably looking at that and trying to see if there's things that they can shift to non-levy related expenses.
Sure. Okay. Good, thanks. Anybody, any questions? Well, make sure you email Carl if you do have any. Thank you very much, Carl. That's very informative. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on, we'll move into the discussion, possible motion action item. The first is ordering of a special election for our county clerk. And then we'd be looking at the spring of 2025 for that election. So does anyone want to make a motion?
So move.
Okay, motion by Mr. Waddle, is there a second? Second by Mr. Peterson. Is there any discussion? Anybody have any questions or want any clarification on this? Do you have something, Pat?
I was just, there are some spring elections for municipalities. Would that be same time?
It'll be
Yeah,
combined
it'll
with
be
that.
the same.
Yeah, so it won't be cost any extra, so,
Okay, so
okay. Okay, hearing none, then why don't you proceed to vote on this? Okay, that special order passes. All right, and number 2 is the appointment of the interim county clerk. With Megan has sent in her resignation letter. And her intent is to decline when she is elected this evening. And so I'll let you go through what you're thinking as far as.
Yep, so like you said, I submitted my resignation letter knowing I'll be taking over as county administrator, November 17th. And I've also included in my resignation letter, my intent to decline tonight's election after those results are finalized, which leaves the clerk position vacant until the April election. I have spoken with former county clerk Melanie Stake, who is willing to help us out in the interim. She cannot commit to a full-time capacity to help out. But because she has the experience, she has also maintained being the town of Dakota clerk for the last handful of years. So she has been up to speed with the elections piece of things. I'm recommending that you appoint her as interim clerk to take over the election duties until we have a new clerk elected in April.
She is willing to accept.
She is willing to accept a part-time interim appointment as county clerk.
And then we'll have Nicole in there too to help, so.
Yep.
Okay, so would anyone want to make a motion to appoint Melanie Stake as our interim county clerk? Motion by Mr. Bossert, is there a second? Second by Mr. Johnson. Is there any discussion? Right, proceed to vote on that. Okay, and the appointment passes. All right, now we'll move into consideration possible action on the following resolution. Resolution number 34-11-24, resolution approving the Waushara County 2025 budget appropriation. Is there a motion to approve? Motion by Mr. Peterson. Is there a second? Second by Ms. McCormick. Any discussion on the budget? Anybody have any other questions? We've had a month to look at this, so I think you probably know what it is. So go ahead and vote on that then. Okay, and the resolution passes. And finally is the ordinance number 690. That's the ordinance amending Waushara County zoning maps pursuant to the authority granted in chapter 58 Waushara County Code zone change for Flight Family Farm 2 LLC in the town of Richford. Is there a motion to accept this ordinance? Motion by Mr. Kirschner. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Gray. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, proceed to vote on it. Okay, and the ordinance passes. All right, very good. With that, then I would look for board suggestions for future agenda items. Is there anything that anyone would like to bring forward as a future agenda item this time? Okay, seeing none, then I would look for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. McCormick, second by Mr. Waddle. We're adjourned.